Hi everybody, my name's Matt Woods, and yes, my title is called Protection on That Erection. And I'm presenting this on behalf of my co-authors, Andy Garbett, Kellie Morrissey, Peter Hopkins, and Madeline Balaam. So the context for this talk, it's broadly around the work that I've been doing for the past 3 years or so, with the local authorities, which are councils in the United Kingdom, around the delivery of sexual health for young people. The bulk of my work has been around the user-centered design with young people, which I've published on previously, but this talk is slightly different. So, about a year into the project, one of our partner public health representatives in the local council came to us with a request. In the United Kingdom, there is a national condom distribution scheme called Condom Token. This is a publicly funded initiative that allows 13 to 24-year-olds access to free condoms. And obviously, the purpose of this scheme is to increase condom use amongst young people. So the way it works is you have a session with a trained sexual health worker who shows you how to put on a condom, and they ask some questions about your sexual history. Afterwards, you've passed and you get your condom token, which allows you access to free condoms from participating condom token venues in the region. And this includes pharmacies, youth centres, doctors' surgeries, and schools. Information about these condom token venues is very disjointed because although it is a national scheme, it is regionally managed. So each region has, at best, a spreadsheet like this about the local condom token venues. So what the local authority wanted us to do was to put that information together into some kind of app. So the council were familiar with an app previously developed by our lab called Feed Finder, which some of you may be familiar with, but if you're not, it's a map-based, location-based review application for breastfeeding mothers, where they can find and review local breastfeeding-friendly places. And they asked us whether we could do a similar thing for condom token venues, and we said, funny you should say that, because we have developed App Movement for that very purpose. So again, if you're not familiar with that movement, the idea is you build community support for a location-based review application. There's a big variety of these, many health-based, but also others as well. Safe places to fly your drone is a key one. The idea is you start a movement around an idea, in this case, condom token venues, and you get people to register support for that idea, which in this case was the service users, the condom token service users. The people who supported the idea then submit and vote on a number of design decisions around the app, such as the name, the logo, and the voting criteria. And at the end of the process, the application is generated, and this is ours, Condom Token Finder. The sexual health service took the lead in putting the venues through the app, and the young people could download the app, see all their local see condom token venues on a map, and leave a review and star rating for the outlets that they used. However, instead of doing an evaluation with young people, because the main drivers behind starting this initiative with a sexual health service, I thought it was fitting to do a critical evaluation with the sexual health workers. So I was interested in this work in seeing how they positioned the sexual health service, their users, and the integration of that application. So conducted 3 focus groups, 3 interviews with workers from the different regions that were involved with the development. So the data presented today is all from sexual health workers. And the data was organized thematically, but I used principles from discursive psychology to drive the analysis, which involves identifying discursive strategies that the sexual health workers used in their accounts. I'm going to talk through these where relevant, but briefly, discursive psychology is part of the turn to language in psychology. You examine talk for systems of meaning making that people draw upon in constructing their accounts of reality. Talk is where psychology happens. So the focus is on how language is used to manage accountability and how it's used to position agents within talk, which hopefully, as I'm about to show, was very relevant in the case of Condom token. So just to begin with, I want to talk about how the Condom token service was framed by the workers. There were lots of examples of this, but I'm just going to focus on one from Rita. This is around the referrals of young people for Condom token when they go for emergency contraception, which provides a particularly vivid example, particularly because of the discursive resources that Rita uses. So script formulations as a discursive resource are events that are described as routine, sequential, and predictable. And three-part lists or lists of three add discursive weight to a verbal account. And here these two discursive resources combine in an interesting and revealing way. There are two three-part lists here. I might be like, spot the three-part list. Could be a game, which make a number of assumptions about those who are accessing emergency contraception. So one, they've put themselves at risk. So this is putting blame directly onto the young people for their non-condom use. This imaginary young person gone down for emergency contraception, not the collective consequence of all sexual partners, not societal attitudes towards sex, not the condom splitting. No, they obviously aren't using condoms. The problem squarely is non-condom use, and this is viewed as easily corrected by the Condom token service. There's your token for next time. You're not going to be coming down here for emergency contraception, which is reiterated succinctly with a second three-part list. There's your token for next time. There's your condoms. Off you go. There's your token. There's your condoms. Off you go. Solved in one fell swoop. The critical literature tells us there's a lot of complicated reasons why young people might not use condoms. So what's really interesting about this extract is that non-condom use is reduced right down simply to access to contraception. It also suggests that young people need to be told what to do. So young people were regularly constructed as misguided, and the role of the sexual health service was to get them back on track. And I want to argue that this positioning of young people was really important in considering the introduction of technology, because for sexual health workers, technology plays a key role in the corruption of young minds. I'd like to illustrate this now with an extended extract from a focus group. So Lucas starts this account by laying out the big problems: sexting and access to pornography, apparently distorting young people's perception of reality. What's really interesting about focus group data, and why I get quite excited about it in a sad kind of way, is we can start to see how meaning is co-constructed by the group members. So if we look closely, we can see another member of this group has some strong opinions here. So after Lucas's contribution, Wendy continues with this narrative because it totally, skews people's views on real life. This is a great example of an extreme case formulation which strengthens an argument through providing an exaggerated descriptive form. So this account from Wendy, sexting and pornography, overwhelmingly bad, totally skewing young people's perception of reality. And you can see here that implicit in this account is that casual sex is rejected as abnormal, endorsing a traditional heterosexist model of sex and relationships. Safe, healthy relationships are seen as uncontaminated by digital technology. Wendy goes on to draw on a frightened emotive state in talking about young people sexting, sending explicit pictures to one another. And from a discursive perspective, we look at these references to emotive states for their interactive function. And we can see Wendy is framing young people sexting as something akin to a horror movie. Authenticity is added through the use of active voicing. So this is reporting speech as if spoken verbatim. My argument here is it's quite unlikely that all the young people Wendy was working with said these exact words. What's interesting is this again adds weight to Wendy's account. Wendy then goes on to equate sending a picture to your romantic partner as showing your entire class a picture of your breasts. So studies around young people's practice of sexting has shown a rather more nuanced understanding around the implications of sexting, when it's safe, when it's not safe. So my argument here is we might more accurately use this quote as an indication of Wendy's naivety rather than the misunderstandings of young people. I want to argue that this is really important in considering introducing a bit of technology into the service, which is what we did. And I want to illustrate this now with what happened with the name of the app. I mentioned earlier, the app is called Condom Token Finder. The name of the app, something that users vote on during the design phase. So users suggest and vote on different potential names, and in theory, the most popular name wins. Towards the end of our design phase, quite a few more colourful names were suggested. Don't be silly, wrap your willy, etc. And the official winner was Protection on That Erection. And at this point, Joe, the lead sexual health worker on the project, pulled me and Andy, my co-author, aside and said, we cannot go with this name. The sexual health service is going to pull out if we go with this name. So at their request, we changed it to Condom Token Finder. Controversial. What I want to do now is show you how Joe provided an account of this happening and justifies the decision of it being overruled. So we start with a long disclaimer about it being a great process to go through, having so many young people involved, so it was great, it was great, it was great. Then Joe builds in a narrative structure around the last 3 hours of the design phase. And we can see trouble in this discourse. He tries to balance the way we would have hoped it would go as workers and young people voting for what they wanted. Joe is then required to justify overriding a decision, was clearly the most popular vote, and he does this with positionality. In contrast to how young people were constructed as misguided earlier in relation to their sexual behaviours, in voting for an apparently inappropriate name, young people are positioned as mischievous and clever, a calculated hijacking of the consultation process. We have a little bit of minimization. I suppose it was quite funny, but then Joe takes on a role of authority in the account, and he does this through his use of modal verbs, and these infer the likelihood of an event happening. Joe here has the authority to assert that we were never going to go with this name, and he does it twice. They wouldn't and couldn't be chosen because he said so. Finally, I want to consider how the youth workers framed the application itself, and really the idea of incorporating an app into the service was a demonstration of the workers' own competence, a display of being progressive, down with the kids. And we can see from Rita again, the primary beneficiaries in this bit of talk of the digital intervention were those providing the service. It makes them feel like they have a connection with the young person. It's constructed as dead exciting, trendy, going in the right direction, even minimizing the potential impact on the young people themselves. This is emphasized by Lucas, where quite upsettingly he seems to think that anything digital would be good, apparently no matter what it does. Although he does, towards the end here, identify one negative, which is around young people having a say. So what do we do with all of this? And really, the first thing I want to say is this is not supposed to be an attack on these individual people. I know it looks like it, but my argument here is these accounts are reproducing broader narratives around sexual health. This is around restriction and around control, which really is incompatible with the idea of doing something community commissioned and collaborative, and these are seen as the principles behind an idea like app movement. This was, of course, facilitated in part by us, such as the change of the name, but it would have jeopardised the whole project if we did. The purpose was to work with the Sexual Health Service, and they would have pulled out if we hadn't have done that. So can we truly do user-centred, engaged work in collaboration with the Sexual Health Service? I am thinking it's unlikely. The role of the Sexual Health Service, as presented by workers, is to manage mischievous and misguided young people. Perhaps most alarmingly, notions of young people having a say came at direct odds with the service. The sexual health workers also had a number of questionable views about the role of technology, what it does, and this all poses significant barriers to engaging young people through these gatekeepers. So hopefully in this paper I've shown some of the challenges of doing engaged work with partner organisations and how this might inevitably sometimes lead to compromise. And this was enabled through using a discursive approach, and I want to argue that this allowed us to examine juxtaposing narratives, contradiction, which wouldn't be possible if we took a realist reading of this data, so taking their accounts as read. Discursive approaches take talk seriously, interrogate accounts, which can be particularly revealing in use cases that prove in some way problematic. I want to say thanks to my co-authors, Andy, Kellie, Peter, and Madeline, and welcome any questions. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Gabriella Marco, Drexel University. Thank you. This was a great talk. I wanted to share that I had a similar experience with a large national funding agency where we had gone through a whole human-centered design process with youth and named an app according to a name that they loved. And then the funding agency was about to pulled some big strings and said, this is offensive, you need to change it.
Yeah.
And so
what did you do there? Did you had to do
I was not the PI.
Okay.
We changed it. Mm-hmm. It was a subtle change, but we changed it. And I think race was also a factor in the United States, and language that to African American youth is normal language that we wanted to use to match their world was deemed offensive. Yeah. To the funding agency. So yeah, I think it's a big. It was interesting that you felt it with community partners. You know, is it tied to keeping certain people happy? Is it tied to keeping our funding and keeping our projects alive? So I don't know what we do about it. But
yeah, and actually the other way around, our PI was horrified that we changed the name. He was like, what should have happened is it was like, you take it or leave it. But actually, I think it was a valuable process to go through. And from a research perspective, we've had some really interesting findings. So thank you.
Volker Wulff, University of Siegen. It's really interesting topic and very important. But I wonder a little bit whether the results you found are also an artifact of the methods you applied. Because if you had gotten these different groups more deeply engaged with each other, and if you had tried to explore their understandings before you got into this type of design phase, don't you think that there were chances of better and deeper mutual understanding?
It's a really important question, and I mentioned right at the beginning that most of my work has been around the user-centered design, of which around sexual health with young people, which I have published on at IDC. The reason for doing this project really was to see whether we could do something in collaboration with the service, because what we made, it was a game to encourage interactions between young people about sex and sexuality. It wasn't recognizable as sexual health to the service, and they are partners on my PhD. It's subject to funding, etc. So this was an attempt, a well-intentioned attempt, to do the app movement thing with the Sexual Health Service. We gave them the app movement pitch and everything. It was not as successful as it could have been, but I personally think that it's really interesting to examine and interrogate these problematic use cases. We don't always end up doing the thing that we really want to do. But as researchers, it's really important that we look at that and interrogate that. Thank you.
Hi, Robert Ferguson from McGill School of Information. It sort of reminded me of the Bodie McBoatface kind of situation.
I'm not familiar, sorry.
So I think it was the Navy. It was National
Oh,
Geographic.
the Boaty McBoatface.
Yeah, they made they said public, oh, you can name this research vessel, and then the name was very silly, and they were like, no, there's no way we can do this. And so I guess the synergy that I'm seeing is, and maybe you have insight in retrospect, of how do we manage the expectations of participants when they're participating in research, especially when we have this noble idea of democracy and co-design or participatory centered design, because we can't always give them exactly what they want, and maybe we could manage this so the negative impacts are potentially reduced.
Absolutely, and there may be some negative impacts here. One of the things that I like to say is, like, young people are not crying out for a condom token finder app. You know, I don't think they were really hurt by it. I am a bit sad that we couldn't go with the name, because imagine the publicity that we would have got from it, and I think it would have been really interesting if we did. But yes, it's an important question about managing expectations. Again, in the paper we talk about how the sexual health service kind of framed that really positively. It's like, the fact that we did this shows that we're not going to put up with crap, you know. So I really enjoy sort of discoursey analysis, and for me it's just really interesting to interrogate that.
So was the app useful? That did more people get condoms?
It's ongoing, and it is integrated in the sexual health service. I think there's not been enough time yet. The thing about these kind of embedded solutions, if you like, they have to be out there for quite some time and be embedded in the service. That has actually happened. It is perhaps more for the sexual health workers at the moment, but they use it, and it is more complex than just has it gone up. They are using this in consultation processes. So they sit down with the young people. Here's your nearest condom token venue. That might be their only use of the app. So I think if we really wanted to do a study of how effective it was, you know, that would be probably a longitudinal study and a project for future work, as we say in academia.